Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It's setting up to be another consequential week in Washington with just a few days to go before a possible government shutdown unless Congress strikes an 11th-hour deal to fund it. We'll get to that in a moment, but we begin with New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the expanding auto workers strike. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This strike now in 20 states. I know you are headed to Missouri later to strike outside a GM facility. The president goes to Michigan Tuesday. He only announced that after Donald Trump said he was going to UAW strike. Do you think injecting this high level of presidential politics complicates getting a settlement?
Well, I think right now we are in such a crisis in our economy, a crisis of inequality, that it is going to take a level of political and popular support, unlike that we've seen in a strike situation like this in recent and modern history, in order for us to get a breakthrough. What we've seen at the big three are CEOs giving themselves as much as a 40% wage and compensation increase, while workers have actually seen a real wage decrease over the last 10 to 15 years. And in order for us to break that norm, I think it's going to take an unprecedented level of involvement to make sure that workers get what they deserve here.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned. Mm-hmm. That sounds like he's disappointed that party leadership is not doing as much as they could. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it always has to be earned. And President Biden showing up to the picket line on Tuesday is a historic event. We have never seen in modern history a president show up to a picket line like this. And I think it should be earned. It needs to be earned. And I believe that President Biden is working towards that, especially when he lands in Michigan on Tuesday, to earn that.
You know, one of the things that's happening in the auto industry, as you know, is this market shift and transition to electric vehicles. You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union-made electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union-made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So
yes.
Why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
No, our car was purchased during the pandemic when before a vaccine had come out. So travel between New York and Washington, the safest way that we had determined was an EV, but that was prior to some of the new models coming out on the market that had the range available. But we're actually looking into trading in our car now. So we're looking into it, and hopefully we will soon.
Elon Musk, who has a majority share in Tesla, has said a lot of things against the unions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these electric vehicle battery manufacturing plants as well are not unionized. Mm-hmm. So there's tension here.
Yes. Yeah. And it's something that I have been speaking with President Fain about, because one thing that we're all on the same page about is that we do not want the transition from a fossil fuel economy to an electric economy to represent an erosion in the unionization and rights of workers.
You were quoted in the New York Times in August as saying immigration is arguably this administration's weakest issue. Mm-hmm. What did you mean?
Well, you know, I think the politics around immigration in the United States is, to no surprise to many people, one of the most contentious issues. We saw this dramatically inflamed under President Trump, but it remains to be a very controversial and contentious issue. And that makes, I believe, enacting some of the policy changes necessary much more complicated and difficult. Now, this week, after perhaps almost a year of pushing from both the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to the New York delegation in Congress, we pushed to make sure that the Biden administration extended temporary protective status, otherwise known as TPS, for Venezuelans, which will allow and open the pathway for Venezuelan migrants to actually begin working and supporting themselves, which will reduce the strain on our public systems, particularly New York's shelter system and more.
It's for 500,000 Venezuelans, but only if they they came here before July.
Yes.
So does Congress need to do something like the HIRE Act that one of our guests, Tony Gonzalez, has put forward, or others, to put that into law so it's not just a one-off?
Well, I definitely think that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that we aren't constantly doing this patchwork policy extensions. That has not happened for decades. But additionally, I think we also need to examine the root of this problem, because if we are constantly engaging in foreign policy that drives people to our southern border. In this specific instance, U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and precipitated, certainly took a large part in the driving of populations to our southern border. Shortly after those sanctions, those broad-based sanctions.
You're talking about Venezuela.
Yes. Shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements and the migration crisis. And we also have to address the domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But, you know, the Maduro government has also been responsible for large parts of that. Are you saying that you want the Biden administration to pull back pressure on him?
I think we need to re-examine the nature of these sanctions. There are sanctions that are very specific. For example, the Magnitsky Act sanctions that do actually focus on the decision makers and people who may be violating norms, practices, civil rights. But broad-based sanctions that punish the overall economy and harm everyday working people that are driving them into the economic and political destitution that force millions of people, both not just to the United States, but even to our regional partners.
Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, as you know, has just been indicted on bribery charges. Should he resign? And what do you think of his statement that it has to do with him being a Latino?
Well, you know, I think the situation is quite unfortunate, but I do believe that it is in the best interests for Senator Menendez to resign in this moment. As you mentioned, consistency matters. It shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. The details in this indictment are extremely serious. They involve the nature of not just his, but all of our seats in Congress. And while, you know, as a Latina, there are absolutely ways in which there is systemic bias, but I think what is here in this indictment is quite clear. And I believe it is in the best interest to maintain the integrity of the seat. I want to emphasize that all people they must be extended the presumption of innocence until proven guilty.
Some Republican members like Matt Gaetz have threatened to try to oust Speaker McCarthy if he through a motion to vacate. Would you vote with him as a Democrat to get to 218 to oust Speaker McCarthy?
I mean, I think that we would have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaker McCarthy has been very weak. I think that he has also engaged in just absolutely terrible decision-making for the American people, from continuing to try to cement denying the right to an abortion among women, to the denial of to policy that denies the reality of climate change, to basic fiscal irresponsibility and recklessness. We are at the brink of a shutdown right now. And so absolutely, I think there is grounds. However, we are also in the midst of an extremely chaotic Republican Party, and we do not want chaos to reign in Washington either.
Congresswoman, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.